Okay, in this video, we're going to be talking about chord progressions in minor keys. Up to this point, most of the information has been about these major keys, right? But what if we instead play the similar progression in C minor? We have a different sounding tonality and different chords. When we move from a major to a minor key, there are a few really important differences between those two keys, between what the notes are in the chords in a minor key, and some special considerations to take into account because of the different nature of those chords, especially when it comes to the 5 chord. So before I get into this, I just want to review something I covered in an earlier video, and that is this idea of the leading tone. In any piece of music in sort of our standard harmonic vocabulary, there is this note called the leading tone, and it's the 7th note in the scale. And because it is a half step away from the root, it has a strong tendency to want to pull toward the root. I mean, 7, 1, B, C, T, Do. That is a really important part of like the sense of resolution that we get from any chord that goes 5, 1, and so much of the harmony that we use is based around this 5, 1 motion. Now, as we'll see in a little bit, when we get into a minor scale, that B is not in the minor scale. A natural minor scale has a B flat, so we're actually missing that note. And so there's some special things we do when we get into minor keys to deal with that problem. So we're going to get to that in this video. Okay, so if you know your minor scale already, then hopefully you would know that a C minor scale has those C, D, E flat, F, G, A flat, B flat, C. And those are the same notes from an E flat major scale. Every major scale has a relative natural minor scale that's 3 diatonic steps down from the major scale. Just like in the key of C, which is all white notes, if we go down 3 steps to A, we can play all white notes and get an A minor scale. So that means that the chords if we're gonna use the key of C as our template and do a C minor scale, the chords that we play in a C minor scale are the same chords that we would also find in an E flat major scale. So just a little bit of relative major minor background to help you understand that. Okay, so let's look at the chords in a minor scale. So just like we did with a C major scale, we're just going to take the triads as they appear in the scale and move them up in the minor scale. So the 1 chord is a C minor triad. The 2 chord is not a minor triad. This would be the D minor. This is a D diminished chord. Very important to know that the 2 chord is diminished in a minor key. The 3 chord is E flat major. The 4 chord is F minor. The 5 chord, as we hinted at earlier, is G minor. But we're going to actually make it major in a little bit in order to get that leading tone in there. But the naturally occurring 5 chord is G minor. The 6 chord is A flat major. The 7 chord is B flat major. And then we're back to C minor. So as where in the key of in the major key we had the major chords were 1, 4, and 5. In a minor key, the major chords are 3, 6, and 7. And where in a major key, the minor chords were 2, 3, and 6. Here in the minor key, the minor chords are 1, 4, and 5. And in the major key of C major, the 7 chord was the diminished chord, while here in the key of C minor, it's the 2 chord that's the diminished chord. I know that was a lot of information, but I'm kind of moving fast in order to make the video not too long. And of course, you can always pause, rewind, or you can just take a lesson with me and I'll explain it to you at your own pace. So let's talk about this issue of the 5 chord in a minor key. It would be really hard to get the tonal sense of arriving at 1 from 5 to 1 if we didn't have that B in our 5 chord. If we just went G minor to C, it has a certain vibe to it. It's not awful in terms of the sense of leading to 1, but if we change that B flat back to B natural and have a G major chord as our 5 chord, we can have a much stronger sense of resolution. So it's very common. It's almost extremely common. It's the most common way of doing 5 chords in the key, in a minor key, is to have the 5 chord be major, even though this note's not in the natural minor scale. So you'd be going along doing all your other chords just like you would in a minor key, your F minor, E flat minor, D diminished, but then when you get to the 5 chord, you make it major so it can punch you back into the 1 chord. Now, because of that change, we could then say, well, let's make a minor scale that actually has that B in it. Well, okay. If you've learned your alternative minor scales, then you would actually recognize that scale, because that's a C harmonic minor scale. That's a really common scale that piano students are taught to learn. When I was a kid, I learned 3 minor scales. The C, I learned my natural minor scale, and I learned my harmonic minor scale, and I learned my melodic minor scale, which is different on the way down. But I never really understood why I had to learn all 3 scales. But this is the reason why, because there is this need for a B natural whenever you have a 5 chord. So oftentimes, like melodies in the key of C minor, they might use this B flat, use the natural minor scale for a lot of what's going on, right? But when it comes time to play the 5 chord, then all of a sudden they'll play a lot of that B instead of the B flat in order to have the sense of the 5 leading to 1. You see that? So in a minor key, we're often moving in between a scale with a B flat to a scale with a B natural, depending on whether we're playing other chords or a 5 chord. Right? Interesting, right? Now, you may have also had to learn in your life a harmonic minor scale. That's when you have an A natural and a B natural, but only on the way up. And on the way down, you play the B flat and A flat from the natural minor scale. That harmonic motion is in there because at certain times in the evolution of tonal harmony, it was considered too exotic sounding to have melodies that went from this A flat to this B. That interval was considered, too wild and exotic. Now, probably if you're like me, I love the sound of that interval. I love that sound, but at certain times that was considered, gauche, not cool, too exotic. I'm not quite sure what the association people had with it, why they didn't like it, but they didn't like that sound. And so what they would do is, if they had a melody that was going down like this, they would just use a natural minor scale. But if they had a melody that was going to be going up to this B, and it was going to be coming at it from an A, they would actually change the melody to be that you have an A natural and then a B and then a C. So anyways, that's a little bit of music theory, and you probably don't need to worry too much about that at this point in your chord studies, but just to make sure I've covered the topic. All right. So those were the triads in the key of C minor, but what about the 7 chords in the key of C minor? Well, the naturally occurring 7 chord in And a C of C minor would be the C minor 7 chord. The 2 chord would be D half diminished. That's a minor 7 flat 5 chord, or a diminished chord with a dominant 7 on it. The 3 chord would be a E flat major 7. The 4 chord, F minor 7. The 5 chord, which we'll make with a B, is a G dominant chord. The 6 chord is a major 7 chord. And the 7 chord is a dominant 7 chord. Now, a couple of things you might need to know, especially if you're playing jazz. For one thing, in jazz, the 2-5-1 is really common, like we've talked about before. And so if you're in a minor key, you're going to be doing a lot of half diminished chords for your 2 chords, and then 7 chords, and then a 1 chord. However, in jazz, we often think of this tonality, this minor 7 chord, as not feeling stable enough to sound like a 1 chord. It might be an acquired taste hearing that. When I first kind of learned about this idea of not wanting to use a 7 on a minor 7 chord as a 1, I didn't quite hear it, but now I hear it very clearly. In jazz, it's much more common to either use a minor major chord as the 1 chord, or to use the minor 6. And they put an A natural or a major 6th on the minor chord and try to treat that as a 1 chord. Probably the minor 6 is a little more common than the minor major. That's a little stronger in flavor, you know? Whereas the minor 6 still gives you that, like, that sense of resolution, but isn't quite as strong as the minor as that. And sometimes you'll see in jazz this just a minor triad, even in some lead sheets. So that's not everything you need to know about minor keys, but that's a good introduction to some of the things that come up when we move into minor keys. As you can see, things have gotten really complicated since the first video, and we've moved from simple kind of triadic things to some pretty complicated stuff with 2-5-1s in minor keys, and what to do with the 7s, and changing the leading tone in minor keys. It's getting complicated quickly. In the course of working with a student, this is stuff that might take years to work on, depending on the student and where they're at, to get from the first video in this series to where we are now. But kind of throwing it all out there, because who knows where people are going to want to jump in their learning. Of course, the best way to work on anything like this is to find a good teacher who can help you figure out the stuff that you need to learn for where you are and who you are as a learner and what your interests are, and help you figure out what the gaps are in your knowledge that you need to work on, and think about ways to practice this stuff in all the different keys so you can easily move to any minor key. It's not the hippest thing I just did. Anyway, to help you figure out how to do all these things in different keys, best fingerings, the best chord voicings, all that stuff. I do like to teach, and you can find out more about me and my teaching availability at my website, cooneymusic.com. That's my last name, Cooney. And thanks for watching the video.